A housekeeper was falsely accused of theft by a powerful family when a millionaire businessman defended her without explanation. Family secrets buried for decades came to light, and a lost love returned after 17 years of forced absence. A story of injustice, betrayal, and second chances that will forever change the destiny of everyone involved. Prepare yourself, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like on this video, and comment where you're watching from. Spring sunlight filtered through the imposing windows of the Bennett estate, casting dancing shadows across the immaculate marble floors. Screams shattered the morning harmony like crystal crashing against the floor. "Thief! That woman is a thief!" Sarah Miller, her 42 years marked by honest work and silent sacrifices, felt the world stop beneath her feet. The accusations floated in the air like invisible daggers, while Mrs. Bennett held the empty case where the emerald necklace that had belonged to 4 generations of her family should have been resting. "I haven't taken anything, ma'am. I swear on my daughter's life." Her voice, normally firm and serene, cracked like a dry branch under too much weight. The eyes of everyone present, the Bennett family, the household staff, even the gardener who had entered upon hearing the screams, were fixed on her with the conviction of those who had already passed judgment. Sarah could feel her reputation, built year after year with impeccable work, crumbling like a house of cards. 2 police officers, called by Mrs. Bennett even before confronting Sarah, asked her to accompany them. As they escorted her toward the front door, Sarah thought of Emily, her 17-year-old daughter who dreamed of studying medicine. What would she think when she saw her mother arrive in a police car? How would she pay for her education if she lost this job? The sound of tires on the gravel driveway broke the tension of the moment. A black Aston Martin stopped with calculated elegance, and from it descended a man who radiated the confidence that only true power bestows. Tall, with an athletic build despite being in his mid-40s, with black hair just sprinkled with grey at the temples. "What's happening here?" asked Michael Reynolds, owner of one of the most prestigious hotel chains in the country and a close friend of the Bennett family. "Michael, you arrive at a good moment," responded Richard Bennett, the mansion's owner. "We're dealing with an unfortunate incident. This woman has stolen my mother's emerald necklace." Michael observed Sarah, noting her reddened but proud eyes, her hands calloused from hard work, and something about her seemed strangely familiar. "This woman is innocent," he declared with a conviction that silenced everyone present. "And I can prove it." No one understood how this man, who barely frequented the Bennett mansion, could be so sure of the innocence of a housekeeper he probably had never seen. What none of them knew was that this seemingly fortuitous encounter would forever alter the destiny of both. Sometimes life places in our path precisely the people we need to find, just when we believe all is lost. Sarah couldn't stop looking out the window of the elegant office where Michael Reynolds had brought her, after convincing the Bennetts to postpone any legal action. The mansion, seen from that room, seemed like a distant world to which she no longer belonged. "Would you like some tea, Mrs. Miller?" asked Michael, surprising her with the use of her surname. "How do you know my full name?" Michael smiled enigmatically while serving 2 cups of jasmine tea. "I know more things than you might imagine. For example, I know that you've been working exactly 3 months and 2 weeks for the Bennetts, that you have a 17-year-old daughter named Emily with an extraordinary talent for science. And above all, I know that you are absolutely incapable of stealing anything." Sarah set the cup on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you some kind of investigator?" "I'm simply someone who has learned to observe." Michael took a seat across from her. "And what I observe is a woman who has worked her entire life with honesty, despite the circumstances. I don't understand why you're defending me, Mr. Reynolds. Let's say I have my reasons." Michael stood and walked to an antique mahogany desk. "Many years ago, my mother worked as a housekeeper. Once she was accused of stealing a gold watch. No one believed in her innocence except the homeowner, who insisted on investigating before calling the police. The watch appeared 2 days later in the teenage son's bedroom, who had taken it to impress a girl. A silence loaded with meaning floated between them. That man who defended my mother changed our lives. He granted me a scholarship to study, and years later became my first investor when I founded my company." Michael paused. "I swore that if I ever found someone in a similar situation, I would do the same." Sarah nodded. but something in her eyes revealed she wasn't completely convinced. "It's a touching story, Mr. Reynolds, but I still don't understand why you're so sure of my innocence." Michael smiled again. "Because I know who really stole that necklace, and I have proof." On the other side of the mansion, in her private room, Victoria Clark, the ambitious housekeeper who had been working for the Bennets for 15 years, observed the interaction between Sarah and Michael through the window. Her eyes reflected a mixture of rage and concern. The emerald necklace was carefully wrapped in a silk handkerchief, hidden at the bottom of her wardrobe, waiting for the opportune moment to accidentally reappear in some corner of the house, far from any connection to her. What Victoria couldn't imagine was that her plans had more facets than she believed, and that her obsession with Michael Reynolds had led her to commit an error that would change many lives, including her own. Prejudices are like invisible chains that prevent us from seeing the truth, even when it's right before our eyes. Sarah's modest apartment in the Riverside neighborhood contrasted dramatically with the opulence of the Bennett mansion. 2 small but impeccably ordered rooms, simple furniture cared for with dedication, and walls decorated with family photographs and Emily's academic excellence diplomas. "What do you mean they accused you of theft?" Emily's voice reflected incredulity and anger in equal parts. Tall and slender like her mother, but with honey-colored eyes she had inherited from an absent father, the young woman had developed an almost fierce sense of justice. "Who do these people think they are? They're people who have lost something valuable, honey." Sarah tried to maintain calm while preparing dinner, a ritual that always helped her order her thoughts. "It's normal for them to suspect." "Normal? You think it's normal to accuse the most honest person I know?" Emily hit the table in frustration. "And besides, who is this Michael Reynolds who appeared out of nowhere to defend you? Sounds suspicious." Sarah smiled slightly while cutting vegetables for the soup. "Sometimes help comes from where we least expect it." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. Emily opened the door to find Susan Parker, the lifelong neighbor and confidant of Sarah. "Sarah, I already heard about what happened." Susan entered like a whirlwind of energy, despite her 60 years. "The entire neighborhood is talking about it." Sarah dropped the knife. "How is that possible? It's barely been a few hours." Isabel, Antonia's niece, works at the florist that supplies the Bennets. She was delivering an arrangement when she heard the screams. Susan sat down, accommodating her ample body in the small chair. "By tonight, half of Riverside will believe you stole the Queen of England's crown." Emily looked at her mother with concern. In a traditional neighborhood like Riverside, where many families had lived for generations and rumors traveled faster than electricity, an accusation of theft could be devastating. "Mom, this is serious. What will happen with your other jobs?" "Mrs. Mendoza on Tuesdays, the office you clean on weekends." Sarah hadn't thought about that. Besides the Bennett mansion, she cleaned 3 more houses and a small law office on weekends. 5 jobs to be able to pay rent, food, and save for Emily's university. "My God," she murmured, feeling the weight of the situation finally falling on her shoulders. "There's something else," added Susan, her usually cheerful face now somber. "Richard Bennett is a close friend of the mayor, and the mayor is the one who authorizes permits for the Sunday market stalls." The small stall where Sarah sold cakes and pies on Sundays, following her grandmother's recipes, was another vital source of income. If she lost that permit— The phone rang, breaking the tense silence. Sarah answered with a trembling hand. "Mrs. Miller, this is Martha Rivers, from the Mendoza house." The voice on the other end sounded uncomfortable. "I regret to inform you that we will no longer require your services. Mrs. Mendoza has decided to reorganize the cleaning staff." After hanging up, Sarah sat down slowly, as if her legs could no longer support her. "The Mendozas have fired me." Meanwhile, in his suite at the Reynolds Hotel, Michael reviewed old photo albums that he hadn't opened in years. He stopped at a yellowed image, a young woman holding a small child in her arms, himself at 7 years old, during a week when his mother had been ill and they had temporarily hired another caretaker. 30 years, he murmured to himself, 30 years, and I still remember that week. His phone vibrated with a notification. It was a message from his private investigator. "Confirmed. Sarah Miller worked for a week at your family's summer house in 1995. Coincides with the period you mentioned." Michael closed his eyes, remembering the kindness of that young woman who had told him stories to help him sleep when he was worried about his sick mother. The same woman who now, 3 decades later, faced the destruction of everything she had built. "This time I'll be the one to tell the story," he promised quietly. Our past never completely disappears. Sometimes it just patiently waits for the right moment to remind us who we really are. The main office of the Reynolds Royal Hotel perfectly reflected its owner's personality. Elegant without ostentation, functional without sacrificing beauty, and with panoramic views that reminded everyone that the right perspective changes everything. Michael observed the city from his window, while Diana Quinn, his personal assistant for the last 12 years, updated him on the situation. "The investigation confirms your suspicions," explained Diana, an efficient 50-year-old woman who handled Michael's schedule with military precision. "Victoria Clark, the Bennetts' housekeeper, has had an obsession with you since you met at that charity gala 2 years ago. She's been collecting newspaper clippings about you and following all your movements on social media." "And the necklace?" "According to our informant in the mansion, Victoria hid it in a music box in her room. She plans to find it casually in some corner of the house in a few days, when Sarah has been completely discredited." Michael nodded slowly. "What do we know about Sarah's current situation?" Diana consulted her notes. "In the last 48 hours, she has lost 3 of her 5 jobs. Nobody wants to hire a supposed thief. The rumor has spread throughout Riverside and nearby neighborhoods. And her daughter? Emily Miller, 17, outstanding student at Riverside High School. Yesterday she didn't attend classes. According to our sources, some classmates started calling her the thief's daughter." Michael hit the desk in frustration. "I need to talk to Sarah today. Arrange an appointment." "I already tried. She refuses to meet with you." "What? Why?" Her exact words were, "I appreciate his intervention, but I don't need charity from anyone. I'll resolve this on my own." Michael smiled, despite the situation. That response confirmed everything he remembered about Sarah. Proud, independent, incapable of accepting favors that might compromise her dignity. Well, if Mohammed won't come to the mountain. 2 hours later, Michael parked his car. He had deliberately chosen the least ostentatious from his collection, in front of the apartment building where Sarah lived. The contrast with his usual residence was notable, but the businessman had grown up in a place not very different before his determination, and some luck changed his destiny. Emily opened the door, her eyes immediately revealing that she had been crying. "Mr. Reynolds?" Her surprise was evident. "My mother isn't here. Do you know where I can find her? She's at St. James Church cleaning. Father Thomas has always appreciated her and offered her that temporary job while—" Emily didn't finish the sentence. "While this situation is resolved," Michael completed kindly, "while we overcome this nightmare." Emily raised her chin in a gesture that immediately reminded him of Sarah. "My mother is innocent, Mr. Reynolds." "I know. That's why I'm here. The old St. James Church, with its centuries-old stones and stained glass windows that filtered light in explosions of color, was empty, except for a figure meticulously cleaning the wooden pews. Sarah didn't look up when she heard footsteps approaching, assuming it would be Father Thomas. "The floor will be for tomorrow, Father. These pews are taking more time than I thought." "I'm afraid I'm not Father Thomas." Sarah stood up quickly upon recognizing Michael's voice. Her expression reflected surprise, but also a certain annoyance. "Are you following me now, Mr. Reynolds?" "I'd prefer to call it being persistent." Michael sat on one of the already clean pews. "We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I appreciate what you did for me at the Bennett's house, but that's where our relationship ends. Even if I can definitively prove your innocence." Sarah stopped her movements. "What do you mean?" "I know who took the necklace and where it is right now. With a simple call to the police, all of this could end today. Then why haven't you done it already?" Michael looked at her directly. "Because it's not just about clearing your name, Sarah. It's about complete justice. If the necklace simply appears, suspicion will remain. People will say you returned it out of fear. We need the real culprit to confess." Sarah left the cleaning cloth and sat next to Michael, maintaining a prudent distance. "There's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling me." Michael smiled, impressed by her intuition. "I want to offer you a job at one of my hotels." Sarah immediately stood up. "I don't need your charity, Mr. Reynolds." "It's not charity, it's an opportunity." And I need you. You need me? Sarah laughed without humor. A millionaire businessman needs a cleaning woman accused of theft. Sounds very convincing. Michael also stood up, his expression now serious. My hotels are known for excellence in every detail, but lately, the housekeeping department of the Reynolds Royal has received complaints. I need someone who understands that cleaning is not just about products and techniques, but about respect for the space and those who inhabit it. There are hundreds of qualified people without a cloud of suspicion over them, but none with your reputation as a perfectionist, none who have maintained 5 simultaneous jobs for years without a single complaint. Michael took a step toward her. And none who told me stories about constellations when I was 7 years old and scared about my mother's illness. Sarah looked at him confused, and then, slowly, recognition transformed her face. Little Mikey, the boy from the summer house in Newport. The same one who is now offering you not a favor, but the opportunity to rebuild your life with dignity. At the entrance of the church, invisible to both, Emily observed the scene, divided between hope and distrust. Dignity doesn't reside in rejecting help, but in having the courage to accept it when we truly need it, and the wisdom to distinguish between charity and opportunity. The Reynolds Royal Hotel, with its imposing Art Deco facade and privileged location overlooking the Central Park, was the flagship of Michael's chain. For Sarah, crossing its doors as an employee meant entering a completely different world from what she was accustomed to. Mrs. Miller, welcome. James Harrison, the personnel director, received her with a cordiality that Sarah found surprisingly genuine. Mr. Reynolds spoke very highly of you. I hope to meet his expectations, responded Sarah, aware of the curious glances from the rest of the staff. Some whispered, and she could perfectly imagine what they were saying. Who was this middle-aged woman who received special treatment from the owner himself? You'll begin as assistant supervisor of the housekeeping department, explained James, as he guided her through the elegant corridors. Mrs. Oliveira, the head supervisor, is about to retire, and we need someone to learn all the protocols. Sarah stopped in her tracks. Supervisor? I thought I would start as regular cleaning staff. James seemed confused. Mr. Reynolds was very specific about your position. I need to speak with him. The determination in her voice left no room for discussion. 20 minutes later, Sarah was waiting in the anteroom of Michael's office, ignoring Diana Quinn's evaluative gaze. Go ahead, Mrs. Miller, Diana finally invited. Mr. Reynolds will see you now. Michael was standing by the window when Sarah entered. For a moment, observing him against the midday light, Sarah remembered the frightened boy from 30 years ago, seeking imaginary constellations on his bedroom ceiling to forget his fear. Sarah, any problem on your first day? I don't accept the supervisor position. Michael raised an eyebrow. Do you prefer a position of greater responsibility? I can consider... I want to start from the bottom, interrupted Sarah. As a regular housekeeper. But you're overqualified for... It's my condition. Sarah kept her gaze fixed on him. If you really want to help me, respect my decision. I need to earn the respect of my colleagues, not have them think I received preferential treatment. Michael studied her in silence for a few seconds and then smiled slowly. I'll talk to James to make the change. But with one condition, you'll accept the same salary we initially offered you. That wouldn't be fair to the others. It will be when you prove you're worth it. And you will. Meanwhile, at Riverside High School, Emily faced her own battles. News of the accusation against her mother had spread like wildfire, transforming her school life into a daily exercise in resistance. Here comes the thief's daughter, whispered a voice loud enough to be heard when Emily entered the cafeteria. Jake Sullivan, her lab partner and friend since childhood, sat across from her, deliberately ignoring the whispers. They're idiots, he declared, pushing a piece of chocolate cake toward her. You need energy for the chemistry exam. Emily smiled gratefully. I don't even remember studying. Luckily, I do. And I know you well enough to know that even on autopilot, you're smarter than all of them put together. From a nearby table, Olivia Parkinson, daughter of the urban planning counselor and self-proclaimed social queen of the high school, observed the scene with disdain. It seems that criminal genetics don't affect everyone, she commented loudly. Jake continues to be kind to little Emily despite her family situation. Emily clenched her fists under the table, but Jake placed a hand over hers. "It's not worth it," he murmured. "Besides, I have interesting news. My father works at the private clinic that serves the employees of the Reynolds Hotel. He told me your mother has started working there, and that Michael Reynolds himself went down to personally introduce her to the cleaning team, something unprecedented according to my father." Emily frowned. "I don't like it. There's something strange about all this. In someone recognizing your mother's value? In a millionaire appearing out of nowhere to save a housekeeper accused of theft?" Emily lowered her voice. "What if he has other intentions?" Jake looked at her seriously. "Have you considered the possibility that he's simply a good person? Good people are kind to waiters and donate to charities. They don't hire lawyers for housekeepers or offer them jobs in luxury hotels." The bell interrupted their conversation. As they headed to the laboratory, Olivia intercepted their path. "Hey, Emily, I was wondering if we could talk after class." Emily looked at her with distrust. "About what? About your academic future?" Olivia smiled with false sweetness. "My father is friends with the Dean of Medicine at Central University. You know, the one you dream so much of getting into." Miles away at the Bennett mansion, Victoria Clark was panicking. The emerald necklace, which she had carefully hidden in her room, had disappeared. In its place, she found a simple note: "Secrets never remain buried forever." When the path seems blocked by insurmountable walls, sometimes we must take a step back to discover that there are doors where we only saw stone. Sarah's first week at the Reynolds Royal Hotel had been exactly what she expected: exhausting, demanding, and somehow comforting. There was something deeply satisfying in the order she created with her hands, in the perfection of an immaculate room, in the knowledge that her work, although invisible to many, made a difference in the guests' experience. What she didn't expect was the reaction of her colleagues. At first she had noticed the wary glances, the whispers that ceased when she entered the break room. She knew rumors had preceded her. But on the third day, when she finished her shift 15 minutes early and began helping Eleanor, a young housekeeper who was struggling with a particularly messy room, something changed. "You didn't have to help me," said Eleanor when they finished, "especially after how we've treated you." Sarah shrugged. "My grandmother used to say that prejudices are undone with actions, not words." By the end of the week, 3 housekeepers had invited her for coffee after their shift, and the laundry supervisor had begun asking her advice on how to remove certain difficult stains. "You seem to be adapting well," commented Michael, appearing unexpectedly while Sarah meticulously cleaned the presidential suite. Sarah startled slightly. She hadn't seen him since their conversation in the office on the first day. "The work is pleasant," she responded, continuing with her task, "although I wonder why the hotel owner is so interested in a simple housekeeper." Michael smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "Perhaps because this housekeeper is the only person in the entire hotel who doesn't pretend to be someone else when I'm around." The comment took Sarah by surprise. There was an unexpected vulnerability in his voice. "It must be difficult," she conceded, "not knowing if people are kind because of who you are or what you have. It's like living in a permanent play, where all the actors know their lines except you." Michael walked to the window. "By the way, I have news about the Bennett case." Sarah stopped cleaning and looked at him expectantly. "The necklace has disappeared from Victoria's hiding place. She's terrified." "Was it you?" Michael shook his head. "My investigator only located it. He didn't take it. Someone else is playing on this board. And is that good or bad for me? Depends on who it is and what they intend." Michael looked at her seriously. "Sarah, there's something else you should know. I've been investigating your past." The woman visibly tensed. "By what right?" "By the right of someone who wants to help you, and I've discovered something interesting about your ex-husband, David." Sarah paled. "Don't mention that name." "I need to because he's related to the Bennetts more than you imagine." At that moment, Sarah's phone vibrated. It was a message from Emily. "I need to see you urgently. Olivia Parkinson says she can get me a scholarship for medical school." "I have to go," said Sarah, quickly gathering her things. "This conversation isn't over," warned Michael. "For me, it is." Sarah paused at the door. "Michael, I appreciate what you've done for me, but there are parts of my life that are untouchable. My past with David is one of them." Meanwhile, in a cafe near Riverside High School, Emily listened with incredulity to Olivia's proposal. "Let me see if I understand," she said slowly. "Your father can guarantee me a place in medical school if I convince my mother to withdraw any possible complaint against the Bennets." Olivia took a sip of her latte, feigning disinterest. "The Bennets are close friends of my family. They don't want scandals. If your mother signs a document acknowledging there was a misunderstanding and commits to not taking legal action, my father will make a call to the dean." "Why would you help the thief's daughter?" asked Emily, deliberately using the nickname that Olivia and her friends had popularized. "Let's say I'm a compassionate person." Olivia smiled, without the smile reaching her eyes. "Besides, the urban planning councillor always needs gestures that improve his public image. Helping a brilliant student of humble origin achieve her dream is exactly the kind of story the press loves." "And what about the truth? My mother didn't steal that necklace." "Truth, dear Emily, is relative, and in this case much less important than your future." Olivia leaned forward. "Think about it. Years of effort and sacrifice from your mother would finally bear fruit. Is it worth sacrificing that for a principle?" At that moment, Sarah entered the cafe and immediately located her daughter. The expression on Emily's face, a mixture of confusion and distress, ignited all her maternal alarms. "Emily, what's happening?" Olivia rose with studied grace. "Mrs. Miller, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Emily speaks wonders about you." Sarah looked at the young woman with distrust. "And you are—" "Olivia Parkinson, daughter of Councillor Frank Parkinson." She extended a hand that Sarah didn't shake. "I was just commenting to Emily about an extraordinary opportunity for her academic future." "I see." Sarah sat next to her daughter. "And what would we have to do to deserve this opportunity?" The tone in which she pronounced the last word made it clear that she perfectly understood the transactional nature of the offer. "Oh, almost nothing. Just a small misunderstanding to clarify with the Bennets." Olivia collected her purse. "I'll leave you to discuss it as a family. Emily has my number." When Olivia left, Sarah took her daughter's hands. "What exactly has she proposed to you?" Emily explained the situation with a trembling voice. "I know we shouldn't accept, but Mom, it's medicine at Central University. It's everything I've always dreamed of." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. All her life she had worked for that dream, to give Emily opportunities she never had. Was it worth sacrificing her truth, her dignity, for that future? "Do you know what hurt me most when your father abandoned us?" she asked softly. "It wasn't the betrayal, not even the economic difficulties. It was realizing that I had been living a lie for years, that I had built my life on an illusion." Emily looked at her surprised. Sarah rarely spoke of David. "Accepting that proposal would be like returning to that life of lies, and there is no future, however brilliant, that deserves to be built on a lie." At that precise moment, a few streets away, Michael Reynolds was meeting with his lawyer, Charles Montgomery. "Are you sure about this?" asked Charles, reviewing the documents before him. "You could lose millions." "Or gain something much more valuable," responded Michael, signing the last document. "Some debts aren't paid with money, Charles. Sometimes the most important decisions of our lives are made in everyday moments, in anonymous cafes or in silent offices, when we decide what kind of story we want to write with our actions. The Regional Food and Wine Festival, one of the most important cultural events of the year, transformed the central plaza of the city into a feast for the senses. Traditional food stalls, culinary demonstrations and cooking contests attracted thousands of visitors, including nationally renowned food critics. For Sarah, who had grown up learning her grandmother's ancestral recipes, the festival had always been a special moment. This year, however, she observed it from afar, aware that her recent notoriety might not make her welcome. "Why don't you participate?" Susan's voice startled her. Her friend had approached silently, while Sarah observed the preparations from a park bench. "You perfectly well know why," responded Sarah with a sad smile. "Nobody wants to buy cakes from an alleged thief." "Nonsense! Your almond and honey cakes have won second prize 3 consecutive years. People have short memories when it comes to good food." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not ready to face all those stares." "You won't have to." The new voice belonged to Thomas Anderson, the executive chef of the Reynolds Royal Hotel restaurant, a man of robust constitution and even more imposing character. "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Reynolds sends me." Sarah rolled her eyes. Of course he does. We need help at our festival stall. One of our pastry chefs has fallen ill, and we have a space on the team. Thomas looked at her evaluatively. Mr. Reynolds mentioned that you have exceptional culinary skills. And what else did Mr. Reynolds tell you about me? Only what's necessary, that you are trustworthy, and that your cakes could make a culinary critic cry. Thomas consulted his watch. So, are you coming or not? The festival begins in 3 hours and we still have to prepare the dough for the tartlets. Susan gently pushed Sarah. Go. I'll let Emily know where you are. The Reynolds Royal Hotel stall, elegantly decorated with corporate colors and located in a privileged area of the plaza, was buzzing with activity when Sarah arrived. 6 cooks worked coordinated like dancers in a reduced space, preparing small culinary works of art. Sarah, you finally arrive. Michael suddenly appeared, surprisingly wearing an apron over his designer shirt. Let me introduce you to the team. Team, this is Sarah Miller, our traditional pastry specialist. The cooks greeted her with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but without the wariness that Sarah had anticipated. It was as if within that small space there existed a parallel world where her reputation hadn't preceded her. What are you doing here? She whispered to Michael, while putting on her own apron. Family tradition. My grandfather was a baker before opening his first inn. I've never missed a food festival since I can remember. Michael handed her a bowl with ingredients. I thought it would be a good opportunity for you. For what? To be exhibited as your charity work? Michael looked at her seriously. For people to know you for your talent, not for malicious rumors. Before Sarah could respond, Thomas announced the arrival of the first group of critics. Among them, Sarah recognized with horror Richard Bennett and his wife Elizabeth. I can't do this, she murmured, taking a step back. Michael firmly held her by the shoulders. Yes, you can, and you'll do it brilliantly. During the following hours, Sarah immersed herself in the preparation of her specialties, almond and honey cakes following her grandmother's recipe, lemon meringue tarts with slightly toasted meringue, and her personal creation, a chocolate and orange cake that she had perfected during years of Sundays at the market. The Bennetts recognized her immediately, of course. Richard looked at her with a mixture of surprise and disdain, while Elizabeth seemed simply uncomfortable. However, when they tasted her cakes, something changed in their expressions. This is extraordinary, admitted Richard, referring to the chocolate and orange cake. Who is the pastry chef? Sarah Miller, sir, responded Thomas with professional pride. Exclusive family recipe. Elizabeth Bennett looked directly at Sarah for the first time. My mother made a similar cake. I never found anyone who could recreate it. To everyone's surprise, especially Sarah's, Elizabeth approached the preparation area. Mrs. Miller, could we talk for a moment? In a secluded corner, away from curious ears, Elizabeth spoke in a low voice. This cake, it's identical to what my mother prepared. It even has that touch of cardamom that few would detect. Sarah nodded. The recipe isn't originally mine. It was taught to me by an elderly woman I worked for many years ago in Newport. Miss Margaret. Elizabeth paled. Margaret was my grandmother. I know, confessed Sarah. I cared for her during her last months. She gave me the recipe as thanks because none of her granddaughters had interest in traditional cooking. I was 16 and too busy rebelling, murmured Elizabeth with suddenly moist eyes. When I finally wanted to learn, it was too late. It's never too late to honor family traditions. Elizabeth studied Sarah with new perspective. I always wondered who was the young woman who accompanied my grandmother in her final days. She mentioned you with such affection in her letters. It was another life, said Sarah simply. You know, I never really believed that you had stolen that necklace. Elizabeth lowered her voice even more. Victoria has always been problematic, but Richard considers her part of the family after so many years. Meanwhile, across the plaza, Emily observed the scene with a mixture of pride and confusion. Seeing her mother at the prestigious Reynolds Hotel stall, apparently conversing on friendly terms with the woman who had accused her of theft weeks ago, seemed taken from a surrealist film. Your mother is amazing, commented Jake, who accompanied her. She seems able to make friends in any situation. Or perhaps someone is pulling the strings to create these coincidences, responded Emily, observing Michael Reynolds, who supervised the stall with professional attention. "You still distrust him. There's something that doesn't fit. Why so much interest in us?" Jake followed her gaze. "Perhaps you should ask him directly." "Perhaps I will." At sunset, when the festival reached its peak, the time came to announce the winners of the traditional pastry contest. To Sarah's astonishment, her chocolate and orange cake received first prize, with a special mention from the jury for keeping the regional culinary heritage alive. While receiving the small trophy amidst applause, Sarah searched for Emily in the crowd. She found her at the back of the plaza, but she wasn't alone. Next to her was Michael Reynolds, and by the intensity of their expressions, they seemed engrossed in a very serious conversation. A few meters from them, partially hidden behind a craft stall, Victoria Clark observed the scene with eyes loaded with resentment. In her hand, she clutched a mobile phone where a recently sent message read, "I found her. After all these years, I found the woman who ruined our plans. What do we do now?" Sometimes destiny weaves its threads with such subtlety that only when looking back can we see the complete tapestry it has been forming with our seemingly separate lives. Private investigator Robert Lane's office contrasted dramatically with the elegant facilities of the Reynolds Hotel, a functional and discreet space in a nondescript building downtown, with blinds that filtered the morning light and metal filing cabinets that kept the secrets of hundreds of lives. Michael reviewed the report that Robert had placed on the desk, his expression becoming more somber with each page. "Are you completely sure about this?" Robert nodded. His face, weathered by decades of investigations, reflected the seriousness of the matter. "Bank documents, transfers, private correspondence, it's all there. David Miller didn't abandon Sarah and his daughter of his own will. He was forced to disappear. By the Bennetts? By William Bennett, the patriarch, Richard's father, when he discovered that his favorite housekeeper, Margaret Wilson, had secretly bequeathed a small property in Newport to Sarah. He pulled all his strings to prevent her from claiming it." Michael stood up, unable to contain his indignation. "And what does David have to do with all this?" "David worked for the law firm that managed the Bennett estate. He discovered Margaret's will and made the mistake of mentioning it to his wife. William found out and gave him an ultimatum: disappear forever or face a fabricated embezzlement accusation that would send him to prison." "My God." Michael ran a hand across his face. "Sarah always believed he had voluntarily abandoned them. There's more." Robert extracted another document from the file. "The property that Margaret left to Sarah seems insignificant, a small rural plot on the outskirts of Newport, but in the last 20 years that area has been greatly revalued due to tourism development. How much is it worth now? Approximately $7 million. And the most interesting thing," Robert pointed to an attached map. "That plot is right in the middle of the land where your Reynolds Newport Hotel is built." Michael remained motionless. "Are you saying I bought land stolen from Sarah?" "Technically, you bought it legally. The Bennetts had regularized the situation before selling. But morally it's theft." Michael hit the desk in frustration. "And Victoria Clark? How does she fit into all this? She's William Bennett's niece, although she uses her mother's surname to maintain discretion. She's been the family informant inside the house for years." Meanwhile, in the modest riverside apartment, Sarah was carefully organizing her collection of recipes in a new notebook. The festival prize had reactivated her passion for baking, and Thomas Anderson had offered her occasional collaboration in the hotel restaurant. The doorbell rang, interrupting her concentration. Upon opening, she found Emily and Jake loaded with bags of Chinese food. "We thought we could celebrate your culinary victory," explained Jake with a smile. Sarah received them with joy, noting the closeness between the young people. There was something new in the way Emily smiled at Jake, a warmth that went beyond childhood friendship. "Mom, we need to talk." Emily waited until they were seated with the food served. "Yesterday I had a conversation with Michael Reynolds." Sarah visibly tensed. "About what?" "About Dad." Sarah's fork remained suspended halfway. "What does he know about your father?" "Apparently, more than us." Emily exchanged a glance with Jake, seeking support. "Mum, Dad didn't abandon us because he wanted to." Sarah put down the fork and looked fixedly at her daughter. "Emily, your father made his decision 17 years ago. There's nothing more to know." "Yes, there is." Emily took an envelope from her backpack. "Michael gave me this. They're copies of documents that prove Dad was threatened to disappear from our lives. This is absurd. Why would anyone do something like that? For a property in Newport. Emily spread an old document on the table. A property that Miss Margaret, Elizabeth Bennet's grandmother, left you. Sarah took the paper with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the elegant handwriting of the elderly woman she had cared for with such affection. The will, dated 2 weeks before her death, clearly bequeathed to her a small house with land on the outskirts of Newport. "I never knew about this," she murmured. "Margaret mentioned that she wanted to leave me a keepsake, but I thought she was referring to her recipes. According to Michael, that property is now worth millions," intervened Jake, "and the most incredible thing is that part of the Reynolds Newport Hotel is built on that land." Sarah dropped the document, her mind trying to process all this information. Was it possible that David hadn't voluntarily abandoned them? That all this time he had been a victim of such cruel manipulation? "Why is Michael Reynolds digging all this up now?" she finally asked. "He says he found out accidentally while investigating the necklace case," responded Emily. "But there's something else. He knew Dad." "What?" "They studied together in college. They weren't close friends, but they coincided in several classes." Emily squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, Michael wants to help us recover what is legitimately ours." Sarah stood up abruptly. "I don't need his help or his compassion, and I definitely don't want to dig up a past I've spent years trying to forget." "But Mom, it's justice. The Bennetts stole from us, they separated us from Dad. And what do you expect me to do? Face one of the most powerful families in the region? Risk the little we've rebuilt?" Sarah breathed deeply, trying to control her emotions. "Emily, sometimes justice is a luxury that people like us can't afford." Jake, who had remained silent, unexpectedly intervened. "Mrs. Miller, my father always says there's no more expensive luxury than giving up the truth. You end up paying for it your entire life." That night, while Emily slept, Sarah took out an old shoebox from the bottom of her wardrobe. It contained the few mementos she kept from her life with David: some photographs, a modest engagement ring, the last letter she received from him before his disappearance. She reread the letter for the first time in years. "Forgive me for what I'm about to do. Someday you'll understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is absence. Take care of our little Emily and remind her that, although she can't see me, I'll always be watching over you both." Those words, which for years she had interpreted as the cowardly excuse of a man abandoning his responsibilities, now acquired a completely different meaning. In his luxurious downtown penthouse, Michael received an unexpected call. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Victoria Clark." Michael immediately tensed. "How did you get my private number?" "I have my resources." Victoria's voice sounded forcedly controlled. "I want to propose a deal to you. I don't make deals with people who incriminate innocence. Not even if I can offer you information about David Miller, your protégé's ex-husband?" Michael remained silent for a moment. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Tomorrow, noon, at the Overlook Cafe. Come alone." Meanwhile, in a modest hotel room in a city hundreds of miles away, a middle-aged man observed a recent photograph of the Food and Wine Festival. In it, Sarah proudly held her prize, with Michael Reynolds applauding at her side. David Miller gently passed a finger over the image of the woman he had loved his entire life, even in the forced distance. "It's time," he murmured to himself. "Buried truths are like seeds. No matter how much earth accumulates over them, they will eventually find a way to germinate and reach the light." The Overlook Cafe, situated on top of a hill with panoramic views of the city, was a perfect place for conversations that required discretion. Michael arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time, strategically choosing a table from where he could observe the entrance without being immediately visible. Victoria Clark appeared punctually, dressed with studied elegance that contrasted with her evident nervousness. She scanned the locale until locating Michael and headed toward him with determination. "Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate your coming. Let's get to the point, Mrs. Clark. You mentioned David Miller." Victoria smiled tenuously while taking a seat. "Always so direct." "It's one of your most attractive qualities, and one of yours is going straight to blackmail from what I see. I prefer to call it mutually beneficial negotiation." Victoria extracted an envelope from her purse. "I have information about David Miller's current whereabouts, and also about certain documents that could complicate the legal situation of your hotel in Newport. Michael maintained his impassive expression. What do you want in exchange? Protection. William Bennett will die soon. Doctors give him barely weeks. Richard will inherit everything and discover that I've been diverting small amounts for years. Are you confessing a crime to me? I'm offering you loyalty. I know too much about the Bennetts. Secrets that might interest you. Michael studied her carefully. Why did you incriminate Sarah with the necklace? The question seemed to momentarily disconcert Victoria. For you, obviously. The way you looked at her when you visited the mansion, I thought if I eliminated her, I would have a chance. A chance at what, exactly? At being seen. Victoria lowered her gaze. I've spent my entire life being invisible, Mr. Reynolds. To William, to the Bennetts, to everyone. I'm the poor niece they received out of charity, the efficient but dispensable employee. There was a vulnerability in her confession that Michael didn't expect, but he remained firm. That doesn't justify destroying an innocent person's life. Desperation rarely seeks justifications, only exits. Victoria pushed the envelope toward him. David Miller lives under the name Mark Stevens in Boston. He works as a high school teacher. He never remarried. Michael took the envelope with caution. How do I know this is true? Because I no longer have anything to gain by lying. William has disinherited me after discovering my loans. As soon as he dies, I'll be on the street. And what do you expect me to do? Offer me a job at one of your hotels, far from here, preferably abroad. Michael put the envelope in his jacket. I'll verify this information. If it proves true, we'll talk about possibilities. But I warn you, Mrs. Clark, any position I might offer you would be very far from financial management. Meanwhile, at the Reynolds Royal Hotel, Sarah faced her own dilemmas. Thomas Anderson, the executive chef, had just offered her a permanent position as pastry chef in the restaurant. I'm not qualified, protested Sarah. I've never worked professionally in a kitchen. Nonsense, responded Thomas with his usual frankness. Your cake won the festival against professionals with decades of experience. Besides, my mother always said you learn more in a family kitchen than in any culinary school. Did Mr. Reynolds approve this? It was his idea, but the decision to hire you is mine. Thomas crossed his robust arms. I need an answer by tomorrow. The autumn menu must be ready in 2 weeks, and I want to include at least 2 of your creations. When Thomas left, Sarah remained contemplating the professional kitchen, so different from her humble domestic space. Could she really reinvent herself at 42, transform what had always been an act of family love into a profession? Her phone vibrated with a message from Emily. Amazing news, Mum. I've been accepted into the pre-university orientation program at the School of Medicine. Jake is in too. I'll explain everything at home. Love you. Sarah smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and nostalgia. Her daughter was one step closer to her dream, while she contemplated a new beginning she had never imagined for herself. That afternoon, as Sarah returned home, she didn't notice the modest blue car parked half a block from her building, nor the man who observed her with a mixture of longing and fear. David Miller, now Mark Stevens, had aged prematurely. His hair, completely grey, and the deep lines on his face reflected years of silent anguish. He had planned this moment for months, gathering the courage to face the woman he had never stopped loving and the daughter he barely knew. When Sarah entered her building, David got out of the car intending to follow her. But at that moment, an elegant black vehicle stopped beside him. The window descended, revealing Michael Reynolds' face. I think we should talk first, Mr. Miller. In the apartment, Sarah found Emily bubbling with enthusiasm, explaining the details of the program that would allow her to familiarize herself with the medical school during her last year of high school. The best part is that it's a merit-based program, Mum. They reviewed my academic record and selected me for my grades, not for influences. Sarah hugged her daughter, infinitely proud. I always knew you would achieve it on your own. Jake and I will be the only ones from our high school. Can you believe it? Emily paused, her expression suddenly becoming serious. Mum, there's something else I need to tell you. Jake has asked me out, like on a real date. Sarah smiled. It was a matter of time. That boy looks at you as if you were the answer to all the universe's questions. Doesn't it bother you? You always said studies came first. The heart and mind don't have to compete, darling. Sarah caressed her daughter's face. I only ask that whatever decision you make be for the right reason. The doorbell interrupted their conversation. Emily went to open, expecting to find Jake, who had promised to stop by later with books on anatomy. Instead, she found herself facing Michael Reynolds and an unknown man whose face, however, seemed strangely familiar. "Emily," said Michael with unusual gentleness, "is your mother home? There's someone who needs to see her." Before Emily could respond, Sarah appeared in the hallway. She remained paralyzed upon seeing the man next to Michael, as if she were contemplating a ghost. "David?" Her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah." David took a hesitant step forward. "It's been a long time." Emily looked alternately between her mother and that stranger, until reality hit her hard. "Dad?" The silence that followed seemed to contain 17 years of unspoken words, unanswered questions, accumulated pain. "Perhaps I should leave," suggested Michael, uncomfortable with the intensity of the family moment. "No," responded Sarah, recovering her composure. "I think we all have a lot to talk about." In the small living room of the apartment, 4 people sat in an imperfect circle. David explained his version of what happened, William Bennett's threats, the false embezzlement accusation that would have sent him to prison, the ultimatum that forced him to disappear. "I tried to communicate several times during the first years," he confessed. "But William had people watching you. Every letter I sent was intercepted. Every attempt at contact was blocked." "Why return now?" asked Sarah, her voice tense with contained emotions. "William is dying," intervened Michael. "His influence is no longer what it was." "And because I finally gathered the courage," added David. "I've lived half a life as a ghost, Sarah. I can't recover the lost years, but I don't want to lose another day." Emily, who had remained silent, absorbing the story of the father she never knew, finally spoke. "How do we know he's telling the truth?" Michael extracted several documents from his briefcase. "We have proof. Bank records, intercepted correspondence, even statements from former employees of William that confirm his testimony." Sarah took the letters that David had supposedly sent her over the years. Letters she never received, full of love, regret, and desperation. "I need time," she finally said. "This is too much to assimilate at once." "I understand," responded David, standing up. "I'm staying at the Reynolds Hotel. I'll be here as long as you need." When David and Michael left, Sarah and Emily remained in a silence charged with contradictory emotions. "What are you going to do?" Emily finally asked. Sarah looked at the letters scattered on the table, fragments of an alternative life she could have had. "I don't know, honey. I really don't know. There are revelations that rewrite our history in a single blow, forcing us to question not only what we believed we knew about our past, but also who we thought we were in the present." News of William Bennett's death reached Sarah through Susan, who had heard it from her niece who worked at the florist in charge of the funeral arrangements. Despite everything she now knew about the patriarch's role in the destruction of her family, Sarah couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The man who had manipulated so many lives could no longer do harm, but his absence didn't repair what was broken either. "Will you attend the funeral?" asked Susan while they shared coffee in the small apartment kitchen. Sarah shook her head. "It wouldn't be appropriate. Elizabeth specifically asked about you. It seems that after the festival, her attitude has completely changed. A friendship with the Bennetts is the last thing I need right now." Susan studied her friend with concern. "Have you spoken with David since he appeared?" "No." Sarah stood up to wash her cup, seeking a physical distraction for her emotional agitation. "I'm not ready." "And Emily?" "She went to see him yesterday." Sarah smiled slightly. They spent 3 hours talking. When she returned, her eyes were red from crying so much, but she was also smiling. She said that for the first time in her life she feels she understands where her passion for helping others comes from. "David was always an idealist," remembered Susan, who had known the couple from the beginning. "Remember how he worked pro bono for families who couldn't afford a lawyer? And now he's a high school teacher." Sarah sat down again. "He continues helping in his own way." "Sarah, what is it that really prevents you from talking to him? The pain of abandonment or the fear of forgiving?" Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. It was Thomas Anderson, reminding her that they were expecting her at the restaurant to finalize the new additions to the menu. The restaurant of the Reynolds Royal Hotel was closed to the public that morning, transformed into a culinary laboratory, where the team conducted the final tests of the autumn dishes. Sarah had integrated surprisingly well into the professional dynamic, contributing an intuitive knowledge of traditional flavors that perfectly complemented Thomas's refined technique. "Your fig tart with almond and honey will be the centerpiece of the dessert menu," announced Thomas after the last tasting. "The contrast between the sweetness of the figs and the slightly bitter touch of the honey caramel is simply perfect." Sarah smiled, still not accustomed to receiving professional praise for something she had always done out of love. "There's someone who wants to personally congratulate you," added Thomas, pointing toward the door that connected to the hotel. Michael entered, accompanied by an elegant man in his 60s whom Sarah didn't recognize. "Sarah, let me introduce you to James Matthews, food critic for the Gourmet Voice and festival judge." Michael seemed especially proud. He has come expressly to meet the creator of the cake that, in his words, redefined his understanding of traditional pastry. The next hour passed in a technical conversation about preparation methods, recipe origins, and culinary philosophies. Sarah discovered that she could speak about her passion with knowledge and authority, earning the critics' evident respect. "Mrs. Miller, I'd like to make you a proposal," James finally said. "We're preparing a book about the evolution of regional pastry. I'd love to include some of your recipes with the family history behind them." Sarah looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "It would be an honor, Mr. Matthews." When the critic left, Sarah turned to Michael. "You arranged this, didn't you? I simply mentioned your talent to the right person. The rest you did yourself." Sarah studied the man before her, trying to reconcile the powerful businessman with the frightened boy from her memories, and with the mysterious benefactor who seemed determined to rebuild her life piece by piece. "Why, Michael? Why do you do all this for me?" "I already told you, because once someone did the same for my family." "There's more," insisted Sarah. "Nobody invests so much effort just out of historical gratitude." Michael sighed, as if finally surrendering to a long-avoided truth. "When I was 7 years old and my mother was ill, I was convinced she would die. Every night, fear paralyzed me. Then you arrived, with your stories about stars and constellations, about how our loved ones never really leave us because they become light. For the first time, I stopped being afraid. They were just bedtime stories. For you, perhaps. For me, they were lifelines." Michael paused. "My mother recovered, but I never forgot that lesson, that words and small acts of kindness can completely change someone's perspective, especially when they're at their most vulnerable." Sarah vaguely remembered that boy, but hadn't imagined that her simple stories could have such an impact. "When I saw you at the Bennett mansion, unjustly accused, I saw the opportunity to return something of what you gave me." Michael smiled with a certain sadness. "Although I never imagined discovering this whole conspiracy in the process." That night, Sarah finally made a decision. She called David and they agreed to meet in a neutral park, a public space but quiet enough for a private conversation. Riverside Park, with its ancient trees and serpentine paths, offered the perfect balance between privacy and openness. Sarah arrived first, choosing a bench with a view of the small, artificial lake. David appeared punctually, walking with the caution of someone entering unstable terrain. He sat, leaving a respectful space between them. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he began. "I'm doing it for Emily," responded Sarah. "She deserves to know her complete story, without intermediaries. And I deserve to tell it to you directly." David breathed deeply. "Sarah, I never stopped loving you both. Every day of these 17 years I've thought about you. I've imagined the lives we could have had." "But you didn't fight," pointed out Sarah, without aggression, simply stating a fact. "You accepted William's ultimatum, because he showed me what had happened to others who confronted him. One man was in prison for a fraud he never committed. Another had lost custody of his children through fabricated abuse accusations." David looked at her directly. "It wasn't cowardice, Sarah. It was fear for you. William made it clear that if I tried to contact you, you would also suffer the consequences." Sarah processed his words in silence. Part of her desperately wanted to believe him, yearned for the absolution of years of resentment. Another part resisted, protecting the scars that had taken so long to heal. "What do you expect now, David? That we go back to being a family as if nothing had happened?" "I'm not that naive." David smiled sadly. "I only hope for the opportunity to be present. To know the extraordinary woman our daughter has become thanks to you. To recover something of what was lost, if possible. And if it's not possible, then at least I'll have had the opportunity to tell you the truth. For you to know that you were never abandoned, that you never stopped being loved. Sarah felt something unknotting inside her, a knot of resentment and pain that she had carried for so long that it had become part of her identity. I need more time, David. I can't promise you anything right now. I understand, and I'll wait as long as necessary. As she returned home, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Elizabeth Bennet. Sarah, I need to see you urgently. It's about the Newport property, the one my grandmother left you. Elizabeth's voice sounded tense. I've found documents in my father's safe. I think you should see them before Richard discovers them. Sometimes the most important decisions are not those we make in dramatic moments, but the small daily choices. Whether we answer a call, whether we accept a meeting, whether we allow ourselves to believe in the possibility of redemption. The library of the Bennet mansion, with its oak shelves reaching to the ceiling and its persistent aroma of old paper and leather, had always been William's private sanctuary. Now, 3 days after his funeral, Elizabeth Bennet carefully removed the contents of the safe hidden behind a false panel of books. My father was meticulously organized with his secrets, she explained to Sarah, who observed the process with evident discomfort. Being in that house where she had been accused and humiliated was disturbing despite Elizabeth's kind attitude. Does your husband know I'm here? Elizabeth shook her head. Richard is in New York, closing legal matters of the succession, and frankly, it's better that he doesn't know about this yet. She extracted a brown leather folder with the initials M.W. engraved in the corner. These are my grandmother Margaret's real last wishes. Sarah took the folder with slightly trembling hands. Inside she found not only the will she already knew about, but also letters, photographs, and additional documents. My grandmother appreciated you deeply, continued Elizabeth as Sarah reviewed the contents. In her last letters to my father, she mentioned that you had been more of a granddaughter to her than her own granddaughters, that you had listened to her stories with genuine interest while we were too busy with our lives. Sarah found a photograph that surprised her, herself, 30 years younger, sitting next to Margaret on the porch of the Newport house. She perfectly remembered that day, how the elderly woman had taught her to prepare the orange and chocolate cake while telling her stories of her youth. I don't understand why William opposed so firmly to my receiving that small property, commented Sarah, trying to comprehend the disproportion between the legacy and the reaction. Elizabeth seemed uncomfortable. It wasn't just the property, Sarah. It was what it represented. She pointed to a specific document. My grandmother left instructions for you to also receive this. Sarah examined the indicated paper, a certificate of ownership of shares in Bennet Investments, the family company, equivalent to 5% of the total. This can't be correct, murmured Sarah, confused. It is. Elizabeth extracted another document, older and more yellowed. And this is the reason. My grandfather, Frederick Bennet, didn't build the family empire alone. He had a partner in the early years, Anthony Miller. Sarah looked up sharply. Miller? Your grandfather? The revelation hit Sarah like a physical wave. Impossible. My grandfather was a carpenter, and also an informal investor. He contributed his life savings to Frederick's first company, a small construction firm that eventually became Bennet Investments. But when the business began to grow, my grandfather gradually excluded him, keeping his investment. Why did my family never speak of this? According to my grandmother's letters, your grandfather was a proud man. He preferred to keep silent about the betrayal and move forward with his craft. Elizabeth sighed deeply. Margaret always considered that a great injustice. When she discovered that the caretaker they had hired for her last months was Anthony Miller's granddaughter, she saw it as an opportunity to repair part of the damage. Sarah tried to process all this information while continuing to review the documents. Among them, she found a map of the Newport property with handwritten annotations. This land, she began, is where part of the Reynolds Newport Hotel now sits, confirmed Elizabeth. And here's the most surprising thing. She extracted a final document from the safe. The sale of that land to Reynolds Hotels was never legal. My father falsified the property documents. Sarah looked at the purchase agreement, where William Bennett's signature appeared representing a company that supposedly owned the land. Does Michael know this? He discovered it recently as a result of all the investigation about the necklace. Elizabeth seemed genuinely regretful. Sarah, my father committed terrible injustices against your family. First against your grandfather, then forcing your husband's disappearance, and finally stealing the inheritance my grandmother wanted to leave you. Why are you showing me all this now? Because it's the right thing to do, and because my father on his deathbed finally expressed remorse. Elizabeth took Sarah's hands. I can't undo the past, but I can try to rectify the future. Upon leaving the Bennett mansion, Sarah encountered Victoria Clark, waiting by the front door, her face a mask of barely contained resentment. So now you're Elizabeth's new best friend, she commented bitterly. How convenient. Sarah looked at her with a mixture of compassion and caution. This woman had tried to destroy her life, but now seemed more pathetic than threatening. I'm sorry, Victoria, for whatever has led you to hate me so much. I don't need your pity. Victoria took a step forward. Do you know why William hated you so much? Because you're the spitting image of your grandmother, Eliza Miller, the woman who rejected William in his youth to marry a simple carpenter. Sarah was momentarily speechless. My grandmother and William? An unrequited love that transformed into obsession and then resentment. Victoria smiled without humor. The Bennetts never forget, Sarah, and now that William is gone, Richard will continue his legacy. Generational vendettas have to end sometime, Victoria. Not while there are Bennetts with power. Victoria looked toward the mansion. Believe me, this is just beginning. That afternoon, in the small kitchen of the hotel restaurant, Sarah was experimenting with new variations of her award-winning cake when Michael entered unexpectedly. Elizabeth called me, he said without preamble. She told me about the documents she showed you. Sarah nodded without stopping her work on the dough she had between her hands. It seems we've both been victims of William Bennett's deceptions. Sarah, that means legally. Part of my hotel is built on land that belongs to you. Apparently, you also own part of Bennett Enterprises. Michael leaned on the counter, observing her work. What do you plan to do? Sarah finally left the dough and looked at him directly. I don't know. All my life I've struggled to survive, to give Emily a future. I never imagined finding myself in a position where I would have to make decisions about million-dollar properties and company shares. I can recommend excellent lawyers. For me to fight against you for ownership of the hotel, Michael smiled. For you to obtain what legitimately belongs to you, whoever it belongs to. Sarah studied the man before her, trying to decipher his true intentions. I don't understand you, Michael. You should be worried, consulting with your own lawyers to protect your interests. Instead, you seem almost pleased with the situation. Perhaps because I see a solution that could benefit us both. What kind of solution? A partnership. Michael approached, his enthusiasm evident. Sarah, you're brilliant. Your intuition for flavors, your knowledge of regional culinary traditions. Imagine a boutique hotel, built on your Newport land with a restaurant centered on artisanal pastry. I contribute the hospitality experience, and you the culinary soul. Sarah couldn't help but laugh at his enthusiasm. A month ago, I was a housekeeper accused of theft, and now you propose me to be your business partner. This is surreal. Life sometimes is. Michael took a bit of the dough Sarah had prepared and tasted it. Delicious, by the way. Cardamom and a touch of orange blossom. Sarah observed him with curiosity. Why do you really do this, Michael? And don't tell me it's just out of historical gratitude or because you told me stories when you were a child. Michael seemed to carefully consider his response. Because I see in you something that is extremely rare in this world, Sarah, absolute integrity. You faced the worst of life without allowing it to harden or embitter you. That's the kind of person I want to associate with. His sincerity was palpable, and Sarah felt a connection that went beyond business or gratitude. For a moment, both looked at each other in silence, silently acknowledging that something was changing between them. The moment was interrupted by Thomas's arrival, who entered the kitchen with a concerned expression. Sarah, there's someone asking for you at reception. Says he's your ex-husband. Michael and Sarah exchanged a significant look before she removed her apron. Tell him I'm coming right away. In the elegant lobby of the hotel, David waited nervously. clearly out of place among the discreet luxury of the Reynolds Royal. Upon seeing Sarah approach, his face lit up with a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Sorry for appearing like this," he apologized, "but I just received a very strange call from Richard Bennett. He says he wants to meet with us tomorrow to discuss a pending family matter." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Richard returned from New York. Apparently, and according to him, William left specific instructions for after his death, related to our family. "I don't like it," murmured Sarah. "After everything we've discovered—" "I know. That's why I came immediately to warn you." David hesitated a moment. "Do you think we should go?" Sarah considered the question, aware of Michael's presence at a short distance, discreetly observing the interaction. "I think we need to face this once and for all," she finally decided. "But we won't go alone. In the game of destiny, sometimes the pieces that seemed contrary align unexpectedly, revealing a pattern that was always there, waiting to be discovered." The tension in the study of the Bennett mansion was almost palpable. Richard presided over the meeting from the imposing desk that had belonged to his father, his face a mask of barely sustained control. Before him, Sarah and David occupied 2 chairs, deliberately arranged to keep them separated. Michael remained standing near the window, his presence clearly unwanted but tolerated by Richard, who had reluctantly agreed to his participation. Elizabeth completed the peculiar group, seated discreetly in a corner, her expression revealing discomfort and a certain guilt, as if she knew more than she was willing to share. "I appreciate your coming," began Richard with forced formality. "My father left specific instructions for this moment." "What kind of instructions?" asked David, his professional voice hiding the anxiety that Sarah could detect in the tension of his shoulders. Richard extracted a sealed envelope from a drawer. "Before opening it, I must inform you that I don't know the exact content. My father was very clear. This envelope should be opened only after his death, in the presence of you two specifically." "Why us?" Sarah couldn't avoid the distrust. "Your father dedicated years to separating us, to destroying our family. Why would he want to reunite us now?" "My father was a complex man," responded Richard, evasive. "His motives weren't always transparent." "That's an understatement," murmured Michael from his position by the window. Richard directed an icy look at him before breaking the envelope's seal. He extracted several pages and began reading aloud. "If you are hearing this, I have passed away, and Richard is fulfilling my last wish. David and Sarah Miller are present, as I requested. The time has come for the final truth." Sarah and David exchanged a look of confusion. "My life has been marked by decisions of which I am not always proud," continued Richard, reading his father's words. "One of the most serious was the manipulation I exercised over the Miller-Stevens family, motivated by reasons that only now can I confess." Richard paused, visibly uncomfortable with what he was about to read. "Sarah Miller is not simply the granddaughter of Anthony Miller, my former partner. She is my biological daughter." An absolute silence fell over the room. Sarah felt as if the floor was vanishing beneath her feet. "This is absurd," she finally managed to articulate. "My father was Michael Miller, Anthony's son." Richard continued reading. "Teresa Miller, your mother, and I maintained a brief relationship before she met Michael. When she discovered her pregnancy, she decided to marry him without revealing the truth. I was already engaged to Richard's mother and accepted the situation, though I never stopped watching over your life from a distance." Sarah stood up abruptly. "No, my mother would never have—" "This is one more lie, another manipulation." "Please," intervened Elizabeth softly, "let Richard finish. When I discovered you had begun working for my mother-in-law, Margaret, I tried to keep you away," the letter continued. "But she became fond of you, without knowing you were actually her step-granddaughter. When she decided to leave you the property and shares, I panicked. I couldn't allow my secret to come to light, for my legitimate family to discover this truth." Sarah looked at Elizabeth, who was now silently crying. "Did you know?" Elizabeth shook her head. "I discovered it just a few days ago, reviewing the documents in the safe. There were letters from your mother to my father, confirming all of this." Richard resumed reading. "My obsession with keeping this secret led me to commit despicable acts. I separated David from his family when he discovered the existence of the will, fearing the investigation would lead him to discover the truth about Sarah. I've spent years ensuring you never claimed what legitimately belongs to you, not only to protect the family patrimony, but to prevent the truth from coming to light." David approached Sarah, placing a hand on her shoulder in a silent gesture of support that she surprisingly didn't reject. "In these my last days," continued Richard, "the weight of my actions has become unbearable. I cannot die in peace without trying to repair part of the damage caused. Therefore, I have modified my will to include a special clause. Sarah Miller must receive 15% of Bennett investments, in addition to the property in Newport and economic compensation for the years of lost rent." Richard looked up from the document, his expression indecipherable. "There's more. My father officially recognizes Sarah as his biological daughter, granting her the legal right to use the Bennett surname if she so wishes." Sarah felt dizzy. Her entire identity, the family history she believed she knew, was crumbling before her eyes. "I need air," she murmured, heading hastily toward the door. Michael made a gesture to follow her, but David shook his head. "Let her process this. I know her. She needs space." In the mansion's garden, Sarah walked aimlessly among the carefully tended beds of autumn flowers. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories, now reinterpreted under this new and disturbing light. The occasional visits of William to her house when she was a child, always with some pretext related to old business with her grandfather. The interest he had shown in her studies, even offering to pay for a university education that she rejected out of pride. The strange intensity with which he had looked at her when he found her working for Margaret. "I always knew there was something," said a voice behind her. Victoria Clark had appeared silently, like a shadow among the hedges. "The way William reacted when your name was mentioned. His obsession with keeping you away from the family." Sarah looked at her with new perspective. "Is that why you hated me so much? Did you know I was his daughter?" "I suspected it." Victoria approached, her usual hostility replaced by a strange resignation. "Imagine growing up as the poor niece, dedicating your life to serving the family, only to see how William looked at the housekeeper with more affection than he ever showed me." For the first time, Sarah felt an unexpected connection with this woman. Both had been, in their way, victims of William Bennett's secrets and manipulations. "What are you going to do now?" asked Victoria. "Will you accept the Bennett surname? Will you become part of this family?" "I don't know." Sarah looked toward the mansion, which now represented an unexpected and unwanted legacy. "My identity isn't something I can change with a legal document. Richard won't accept it easily, you know. For him, this is a humiliation. I'm not looking to humiliate anyone. I just want the truth and what legitimately belongs to my family." Sarah paused. "To my real family. The one I built, not the one imposed on me by a secret." Back in the study, Richard had finished reading the document and was now heatedly discussing with Michael. "It's completely unacceptable," he insisted. "This hotel is built on land that legally belongs to Bennett Investments." "Land that your father fraudulently obtained," replied Michael calmly. "I have enough documentation to take this to court, Richard. A public scandal doesn't suit you, especially now." Richard looked at David, who observed the exchange with an evaluative expression. "And you? Will you also unite against us? After everything my father did for you?" "Do for me?" David's incredulity was palpable. "Your father destroyed my family, separated me from my wife and daughter for 17 years, and you expect me to be grateful?" Elizabeth, who had remained silent, finally intervened. "Richard, enough. You know father acted wrongly. This is the moment to rectify, not to perpetuate his errors." The tension was interrupted by Sarah's return, now with a serene and determined expression. "I've made some decisions," she announced. "First, I have no interest in the Bennett surname. My identity as Sarah Miller is the only one I recognize and value." Richard seemed slightly relieved. "Second, I will accept the economic compensation and the shares, not as a gift or inheritance, but as restitution for what legitimately belonged to my family for generations. And third," she continued, looking at Michael, "regarding the Newport property and the hotel built on it, I have a proposal. Some truths arrive too late to change the past, but just in time to redefine the future, if we have the courage to accept them and the wisdom to turn them into foundations instead of chains." 6 months later, the Margaret restaurant opened its doors on the ground floor of the recently renamed Miller Reynolds Hotel in Newport. The combination of Michael's hotel experience and Sarah's culinary vision had resulted in a space that combined contemporary elegance with traditional warmth. The central table of the restaurant, reserved for the inauguration, gathered a group that months ago would have seemed impossible: Sarah and Emily, David, now officially reinstated in his functions as a lawyer after clearing his name, Michael, whose smile reflected a pride that went beyond the professional, Elizabeth Bennet, who had distanced herself from her husband to support the project, and Jake, whose relationship with Emily had blossomed into something beautiful and promising. "To second chances," Michael toasted, raising his glass. "And to first ones," added Emily, looking significantly at Jake. The festive atmosphere contrasted markedly with the turbulent months before. The negotiation with Richard Bennet had been tense and complex, but finally an agreement had been reached that benefited all parties. Sarah had proposed a strategic association. The Newport property would become a boutique hotel with a restaurant specializing in traditional pastry, operated jointly by Reynolds Hotels, and a new venture founded by Sarah. "I never imagined seeing you as a businesswoman," commented David, observing Sarah with admiration as she personally supervised every detail of the inaugural service. "Neither did I," she admitted with a smile, "but I discovered I have quite a talent for business. Perhaps I inherited it from my grandfather, the real one." The relationship between Sarah and David had gradually evolved toward a respectful and warm friendship. The pain of the past hadn't completely disappeared, but both had found a way to build something new from the ruins, mainly for Emily's sake. "Mom, the local newspaper wants an interview," announced Emily, approaching the table. "They're fascinated with the story of the housekeeper-turned-culinary entrepreneur. Tell them I'll talk to them tomorrow. Today is for us." Michael observed the family interaction with a mixture of joy and a certain melancholy. His relationship with Sarah had grown in complexity during these months. The initial admiration had transformed into something deeper, a feeling he kept carefully controlled out of respect for the family situation still in the process of healing. "What are you thinking about?" asked Sarah, noticing his contemplative expression. "About the unexpected turns of life," he responded. "A year ago you were cleaning rooms and I was trapped in a routine of empty success. And now we're business partners," completed Sarah with a smile that contained more than it expressed. Elizabeth, who had been relatively silent, intervened. "Richard has finally accepted the situation. He won't come to the inauguration, but sends his acknowledgements." "One step at a time," responded Sarah. "I don't expect miracles, just respect." The evening advanced among animated conversations and dishes that masterfully combined traditional recipes with contemporary presentations. Thomas Anderson, who had traveled from the city to supervise the kitchen during the inauguration, approached the table. "Sarah, there's someone in the kitchen who insists on seeing you." Intrigued, Sarah followed Thomas to the kitchen, where she found Victoria Clark, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I came to give you this." She extended a small package wrapped in aged paper. "I found it among William's belongings. I think it belongs to you." Sarah unwrapped the package with caution, revealing an ancient silver locket. Upon opening it, she found a tiny photograph of her mother, Teresa, young and smiling next to a William Bennet she barely recognized, so different from the severe man she had known. "He never stopped loving her," commented Victoria softly, "in his twisted and possessive way." Sarah studied the photograph, seeking in her mother's face some indication of the secrets she had kept. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I'm trying to change." Victoria seemed to struggle with the words. "Michael offered me a position at his hotel in London. A new beginning, far from all this. And did you accept?" "I leave tomorrow." Victoria paused. "I wanted to apologize before leaving. For the necklace, for everything." Sarah nodded slowly. "I wish you the best, Victoria, truly." Back at the table, Sarah discreetly showed the locket to Emily, who examined it with curiosity and a certain contained emotion. "Do you think he really was your father?" "Biologically, perhaps," responded Sarah, "but a father is much more than biology. Your father will always be David, who sacrificed his life to protect us. And for me, Michael Miller will always be the man who raised and loved me unconditionally." The celebration continued well into the night. When finally only Sarah and Michael remained, Touring the empty restaurant with the satisfaction of shared success, they allowed themselves a moment of reflective calm. "Do you know what's most surprising about this whole story?" commented Michael, as they walked among the perfectly set tables for the next day. "What?" "That it began with a false accusation of theft and ended up discovering that it was you who had been robbed your entire life." Sarah smiled at the irony. Life has a strange sense of humor. They stopped by the large window that offered views of the illuminated hotel garden, where an ancient almond tree, the only survivor of the original property, had been preserved as a symbol of continuity. "Sarah," began Michael with unusual hesitation, "there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." She looked at him, a new vulnerability in her eyes. "I know." "You know?" "Yes. And I also know that you've kept your distance out of respect for my situation with David." Michael nodded slowly. "Your family is healing. I didn't want to complicate things. My relationship with David has found its place, Michael. We have a shared past and a wonderful daughter. He will always be part of my life." Sarah took a step toward him. "But I also have the right to my own future. And could that future have space for new beginnings?" she completed, taking his hand. "If you have patience." "Patience is a virtue I've been perfecting lately," he responded with a smile. Outside, in the illuminated garden, the century-old almond tree cast dancing shadows on the stone path, silently reminding them that even the oldest roots can sustain new blossoms. There are stories that don't end but transform, like trees that change with the seasons but keep their essence intact. And in that transformation, we discover that endings are, in reality, new beginnings in disguise. 1 year after the opening of the Margaret restaurant, the terrace of the Miller-Reynolds Hotel in Newport glowed under the golden lights of sunset. Elegantly arranged tables, floral decorations that combined traditional orange blossoms with modern orchids, and a small stage where a string quartet softly played classical American music. The event, the celebration of Michael and Sarah's engagement, an intimate gathering with only their closest people. Emily, radiant in a navy blue dress, personally supervised every detail. At 18, recently admitted to medical school thanks to her academic merits, she moved with the confidence of someone who has found her place in the world. "Everything is perfect," commented Jake, embracing her from behind. Their relationship had flourished during this year of transformations, maturing from a childhood friendship to a young but deep love. "Do you think it's too much?" she asked, pointing to the elaborate decorations. "Mom has always preferred simplicity." "It's exactly what she deserves," responded a voice behind them. David approached, elegant in his dark suit, his expression reflecting the inner peace he had finally found. A celebration worthy of her extraordinary heart. The relationship between David and Sarah had evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and the shared love for their daughter. He had resumed his career as a lawyer, now specializing in social justice cases, and maintained a constant but non-intrusive presence in both their lives. "Dad, have you seen Mom?" "She should be here in 15 minutes and she hasn't arrived yet." "She's with Elizabeth finalizing some details," David smiled. A friendship no one would have predicted a year ago. Indeed, the relationship between Sarah and Elizabeth Bennet had been one of the most unexpected surprises of this year of changes. Initially united by the shared secrets of the past, they had discovered a genuine connection that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. Elizabeth, who had definitively separated from Richard after discovering more manipulations, had found in Sarah an improbable but loyal ally. In a hotel room, Sarah contemplated her reflection in the mirror while Elizabeth adjusted the final details of her outfit, an elegant champagne-colored dress that combined contemporary sophistication with traditional touches. "My grandmother Margaret would be so proud," commented Elizabeth, placing an antique silver and emerald brooch in Sarah's hair. "This was her favorite jewel. I want you to wear it today." "Are you sure? It's part of your family heritage." "You are also part of that heritage, whether you like it or not." Elizabeth smiled with a certain melancholy. "Besides, I think the family history needs new symbols, new meanings." Victoria Clark, on a brief visit from London, where she now directed the services department of the Reynolds Portuguese Hotel, peeked through the door. "Everyone is waiting," she announced. Her transformation during this year had perhaps been the most surprising of all. Away from the Bennets and her obsession with Michael, she had discovered her own worth and capabilities. "Nervous?" she asked Sarah. "Strangely, no." Sarah stood up, smoothing her dress. "I feel that my entire path, even the painful parts, has led me exactly where I should be." On the terrace, Michael conversed with Thomas Anderson, who had been promoted to gastronomic director of the entire Reynolds chain after the phenomenal success of the Margaret restaurant. The concept had expanded to 3 more hotels, creating a brand recognized for masterfully fusing culinary tradition with innovation. "I never thought I would end up adapting a 5-star hotel's menu to include a grandmother's recipes," commented Thomas with a smile. "But those cakes have put our restaurants in all the important gastronomic guides." "Sarah has a gift for transforming the ordinary into extraordinary," responded Michael, his gaze unconsciously seeking the entrance to the terrace. Susan, Sarah's lifelong neighbor and friend, approached with barely contained tears. "I always knew she deserved something special, but this from housekeeper to entrepreneur, and now engaged to an international hotelier." "I don't think Sarah cares much about the international aspect," responded Michael with humor. "In fact, it's probably what least attracts her about me." "True," confirmed Sarah, finally appearing. "What attracts me is your strange obsession with colorful socks and your inability to prepare decent coffee, despite owning luxury hotels." Michael turned toward her, momentarily speechless at her vision. There was a luminosity in Sarah that transcended the elegant dress or the sophisticated hairstyle. It was the inner light of someone who has finally found her place in the world. "You're dazzling," he finally managed to articulate. "Not bad for a former housekeeper," she joked, but the pride in her eyes was genuine and well-deserved. The celebration proceeded with the naturalness of those who feel genuinely comfortable in each other's company. Emotional speeches, shared anecdotes and plans for the future, intermingled with the exquisite food specially prepared for the occasion. When the time for dessert arrived, Thomas appeared with a cake that provoked exclamations of admiration, a modern recreation of the chocolate and orange cake that had marked the beginning of this story, but elevated to a culinary work of art. "The original recipe of Margaret Wilson," he announced, "interpreted by Sarah Miller and executed by our team to celebrate this special moment." Sarah cut the first piece and, in a symbolic gesture, offered it to Elizabeth. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to traditions worth preserving," responded Elizabeth, accepting the plate with visible emotion. Later, when the sunset light gave way to the starry night, Sarah and Michael briefly withdrew from the group to enjoy a moment of tranquility in the garden. The century-old almond tree, now softly illuminated with small lights that seemed like fallen stars, offered a perfect refuge. "Do you remember that story you used to tell me when I was a child?" asked Michael, embracing her by the waist. "About the stars that are actually people who continue to watch over us from the sky." "Vaguely," admitted Sarah. "It's been more than 30 years. You told me that when I felt alone or scared, I just had to look at the sky and search for the brightest star, because it would be someone who loved me watching over me." Michael pointed toward the night sky. "That story accompanied me my entire life. Even in my darkest moments, I looked at the stars and felt that someone was taking care of me." Sarah looked at him with new understanding. "That's why you appeared that day at the Bennett mansion. It wasn't just gratitude for a week of childcare. It was for the light you brought to my life when I needed it most. A light I never forgot. And now we're here, 3 decades later," reflected Sarah. "Under the same starry sky, with one crucial difference," added Michael, gently kissing her forehead. "I no longer need to look at the sky to find my brightest star." From the terrace, Emily observed the couple with a mixture of joy and nostalgia. David silently approached her side. "Are you okay with all this?" he asked softly. "More than okay," she responded. "Mom deserves this happiness. And you also deserve yours, Dad." David smiled. His relationship with Catherine, a literature professor he had met in Boston, was advancing slowly but solidly. After years living in the shadows, he had learned to value patience and authenticity above all. "Sometimes I think about how our life would have been if William Bennett had never intervened," confessed Emily. "If we had grown up as a normal family. Probably simpler, but perhaps less extraordinary." David observed Sarah laughing next to Michael under the almond tree. "Your mother turned every obstacle into a stepping stone. It's her greatest gift and the most valuable legacy she has transmitted to you. And you taught me that it's never too late to rebuild what seems irreparably lost, added Emily, hugging her father. In the hotel kitchen, Thomas supervised the final preparations while reflecting on the improbable journey that had brought them here. From an unjust accusation to a celebration of love and reconciliation. From a falsely accused housekeeper to a respected entrepreneur. From a broken heart to one rebuilt, stronger in its healed cracks. "I wish all stories ended like this," he commented to his assistant. "How? With cakes and champagne?" Thomas smiled, observing through the window how Sarah and Michael returned to the party, hand in hand and immediately surrounded by their loved ones. "No, with people who finally find exactly where they belong. Under the starry Newport sky, in a garden where a century-old almond tree had witnessed generations of secrets and truths, a new story began, not as a happy ending, but as a fresh chapter in a continuous narrative where the errors of the past served not as chains, but as lessons, where pain transformed into wisdom, and where love, in all its complex manifestations, continued being the most transformative force of all. Life rarely offers us perfect closures or complete answers. Instead, it gives us the opportunity to rewrite our story with each decision, to redefine our path with each step. And perhaps that is the true magic. Not the final destination, but the capacity to transform each stumble into a dance, each tear into a seed, and each ending into a new and hopeful beginning.